Good afternoon, friends. Hmm. So we'll start with one question which was given to you, and if we talk about number of things we are going to talk about here. So I think the question was compare the क्या था? Malthus and Marx. यही था ना, ऐसा ही था कुछ मिलता जुलता. Okay. So number of things we find to be intriguing between Malthus and Marx. No doubt, one thing is clear that Malthus wrote his uh, theory before Marx, and Marx was the person who wrote his economic theory later on, and he was highly critical of Malthus. Okay, and he objected Malthus on several grounds. As a result, it appears that Malthus and Marx are quite polar aparts, very different from each other. Despite these differences, there is no doubt that there are lots of differences between them. Still, we can say that there were some similarities between them. Okay, so we can write here, we can start with an introduction. We can say that despite the popular perception of Malthus and Marx being polar opposites, there are several grounds of similarities along with differences. Similarities along with the differences that they had. Okay. Then I'll move on to the main body. And already हमने similarities and differences के लिए context बना दिया है. So why not make the life of the examiner simpler and stop writing bullshit and simply coming to similarities. कोई फालतू की बात नहीं, सीधा काम पे. So we find that there were several similarities between Malthus and Marx. ठीक है, इसमें कुछ similarities लिखी हुई हैं, the notes which were given to you, like both of them recognized negative correlation between wages and the birth and death rates. Yes or no? So both of them were aware about this. However, one thing is very clear, that this idea was more explicit in the works of Marx. In fact, his entire work is based upon the relationship between the wages and the birth and death rates. So that is one. Then both can be recognized as economic theory of population. Yes or no? दोनों ही बात कर रहे हैं population and resource relationship. So both have provided this economic theory of population. both seem to have under-emphasized, इस point को काट दो. I am not actually in agreement with this. So 2 point हमने लिखे हैं. Others also we can talk about. Some similarities. So third point, both have identified, लिख लो इसको, both have identified the presence of an industrial reserve army. Presence of an industrial reserve army. Although the idea is implicit, in Malthusian and explicit in the Marxian theory. So that is another similarity between them. Then others, if we talk about, both of them seem to have agreed on exponential growth rate of population. ठीक है, देखा था हमने. I had proved yesterday, if you remember. ऐसे क्यों देख रहे हो तुम लोग मुझे? I think I had proved yesterday that even Marx agreed that the population could grow very, very fast. ठीक है, so इसको लिख लो. Both agreed on the view that population can grow exponentially. Population can grow exponentially. Full stop. Malthus was more explicit. With his geometric progressions. While Marx was more implicit. So that is another similarity between them. Then both seem to have agreed. देखो, both seem to have agreed about the innate passion between the sexes. Full stop. Again here, Malthus was more explicit than Marx. Then another thing which we find similarity between them, can we say that both seem to have agreed on the idea of socio-economic checks on population? So both seem to be in agreement with respect to the socio-economic checks on population. Full stop. Malthus in his preventive checks manifests this idea. While Marx manifests it in his ideal state of communism. ठीक है, so this is another similarity between them. One more similarity, final similarity we can talk about between them is that we can agree on this. Can we say that both seem to have broadly helped in the development of demographic science or science of demography? So एक point और लिख लो. Both have contributed. Both have contributed to the broad development of demographic science. To the broad development of demographic science. ठीक है. So these are some of the similarities between them. Now coming to the differences. अब इस differences में भी मैं कुछ कुछ similarities बताता रहूंगा. ठीक है, but we will see that how they differed more specifically. So first point लिखते हैं. Both Marx and Malthus were in favor of progress. ठीक है. So both of them were in favor of progress. However, their ideas of progress differed. Their ideas of progress differed. Malthus favored progress as an evolutionary process where status quo was maintained. Where status quo was maintained. What does this means? He favored the existence of the capitalistic society. ठीक है, status quo of the capitalistic society was to be maintained. The political economic system was not to be changed. ठीक है. On the other hand, can we say Marx was more in favor of revolution? His definition of progress was that of revolution. So लिखो, on the other hand, Marx favored progress that was revolutionary. Full stop. He conceptualized social progress. Through violent revolutionary movement. Where the poor, which formed the majority, would overthrow the rich, which was minority. The rich, which was minority. ठीक है. So that is another aspect. Then second, both considered humans as rational. Beings. However, the consequences of the use of this rationality were viewed differently. ठीक है. So how they saw this rationality to be different? What was the basic idea of of Malthus? with respect to the human rationality? Can we say for him human rationality was more of that objective type? Yes or no? हमने देखा था ऑब्जेक्टिव और सब्जेक्टिव के बीच में डिफरेंस. So his idea of rationality was a more objective type of rationality where we are recognizing that there are some limits which are imposed upon us by the some outer force, that is the nature. ठीक है. So that was the essentially idea of Malthus as rationality. तो इसको लिखो. Malthus thought human, same point, Malthus thought human, comma, being rational, comma, could recognize the limits to population growth and continued growth or continued population growth could make them fall prey to horrors of overpopulation. ठीक है. सो माल्थस के लिए रेशनैलिटी का मतलब क्या था? यू रिकॉग्नाइज योर लिमिट्स. बट फॉर मार्क्स what was rationality about? Can we say for him rationality meant that we could keep on extending ourselves? There was essentially no limit. He was looking for that perfect society where such limits didn't essentially existed. ठीक है. So लिख लो. On the other hand, Marx thought that humans could use his intellectual capabilities to indefinitely extend and improve his productive powers full stop. This would make the need for population control irrelevant and unnecessary. ठीक है. From this point we can remember and write the next point. So next point में tell me, यहाँ पर they are talking about the rationality. From this point can we also derive the idea of their views on technology? So what was the idea of Malthus on technology? He had, can we say he had very limited belief in the power of technology to increase the level of resources? But on the other hand, Marx was more positive with respect to the role of technology. That if the system was correct, then technology would be what? It would keep on increasing the level of resources. ठीक है. सो लिख लेते हैं. Malthusian perception on technology was very negative, as he had very limited belief in the role of technology to in the role of technology to increase the level of resources. Role of technology to increase the level of resources. इसमें ब्रैकेट में लिखना चाहते हो तो यू कैन ऑल्सो राइट दिस व्यू ऑफ resource is which type of view of resource? Static view of resources. Static view of resources. Full stop. On the other hand, Marx believed that if the politico-economic system was just, then the technology would play very positive role in resource development and would not allow the crisis to arrive. Okay, so this is another similarity between them. Then another similarity between them is, difference between them. Similarity भी है एक, both of them believed in struggle. ठीक है, so इसको लिख लो, both of them believed in the idea of struggle. The idea of struggle. Full stop. However, for Malthus, struggle was that of existence. That of existence. ठीक है, that means existence का struggle क्या होता है? It is struggle between the human and the nature. ठीक है, in other words, a struggle between human and the nature. Full stop. On the other hand, for Marx, the struggle was a class struggle. Comma, the struggle between different groups of humans for productive forces and produce of society. Produce of the society. ठीक है, so again that is another difference between them. Some differences are written here. So Malthus tried to provide a natural law on population. देखा था हमने. His law was more of a universal type of law. So he tried to provide a natural law on population and demographic processes, while the theory of Marx is related with a particular socio-economic structure and would in all probabilities not apply to the other type of socio-economic structures. Okay? So that is another difference between them. Then the ideological perspectives of both of them are antipodal, totally different. And if we talk about Malthusian is capitalist in ideology, where he regarded self-interest among couples to be the guiding factor in marriage, family, and inheritance, while Marx belonged to communist ideology and saw ownership of private property as the root of all evils confronting the society. So that is another difference between them. So analysis दोनों का अलग हो जाता है. When we are talking about capitalism, the analysis is more from individual perspective. ठीक है? On the other hand, when we are talking about communism, the analysis become more from community perspective. ठीक है? So in this respect, both of them were philosophically very, very different. ठीक है? Similarly, Malthus gave relation between wage level and population growth as a, ये तो हमने लिखा था wage level के बारे में. According to Malthusian theory, population problem and inequality are space dependent, while Marxian theory is based upon historical materialism and visualizes these problems to be time dependent. I hope कि ये समझ में आ गया था. I had explained you how one is space dependent and other is time dependent. ठीक है? Malthusian theory is more deterministic. अभी हमने बात किया था मैन नेचर स्ट्रगल हो रहा है वहां पर, and there are limits to which the man can reach or humans can reach. So his theory is more deterministic. While if you talk about Marxian theory has a more possibilistic orientation. There is some possibilism. देखेंगे, although it is not complete possibilism, but still there is some possibilism there. It is evident from the fact that Malthus, according to Malthus, population processes are governed by natural law, while Marx believes them to be result of socio-economic setup of the society, which in turn is determined by the humans. Malthus believed the only solution to this problem was application of positive checks, while Marx pleads for radical dismantling of capitalistic structure to establish communist society and hence showing belief in the ability of the human beings. ठीक है? So very clearly, if we talk about Malthusian theory is what? It is more, it has a more possibilistic orientation. So these are the similarities and differences that we can write about Malthus and Marx. I think कि इतना तुम लोगों के लिए enough होगा to write, even if it is a 150 word answer, वो भी लिख सकते हैं. इसको छोटा करना पड़ेगा. If it is a 15 marker, then also you can write. And even if it is a 20 marker, यहाँ पर examples दे करके you can further expand. Explanations and examples के साथ. ठीक है? So that is the comparison of Malthus and Marx. Very probable question. एक question और पूछा है previous year में, but this question we will take up later on. Marx's view on population is more humanistic comment. ठीक है? Once we are done with demographic transition theory, then you will have to remind me कि ये question बचा हुआ है और इसको हमें करना है. ठीक है? Because till I complete the demographic transition theory, will not be in a position to fully solve this question. ठीक है? Okay. So now let us move on to what we were doing yesterday, and we were talking about the demographic transition theory. So I had given an introduction to the demographic transition theory. ठीक है? And we had to discuss with respect to the stages of demographic transition. ठीक है? So we had talked about the 5 stages of demographic transition. यहाँ पर जो traditional model होता है 4 stages का diagram दिया हुआ है. So we'll talk about, मैं उसमें 5th stage को add कर दूंगा अभी. So first let us talk about the high stationary stage of demographic transition. The first stage, that is the high stationary stage of demographic transition. So if we look into this high stationary stage, पहले diagram में देख लेते हैं. What is happening here? Can you see there is this black lines which represent the death rate? and this reddish pinkish line which represents the fertility or the birth rate. Now, what is the behavior of birth rate? Can we say it is more straight? Yes or no? On the other hand, what is the behavior of the death rate? It is fluctuating behavior. It has a fluctuating behavior. Okay? So if we talk about this is the first stage. Here, why we are first question arises, why we are calling it as the high stationary stage? क्यों बोल रहे हैं इसको? Can we say it is stationary because both birth rate and death rate are near to each other? So the population growth would be what? It would be very negligible. It would be more or less stationary. So that is why we are calling it as the stationary stage. Why we are calling it as high stationary stage? Because what is the level of birth rate and death rate here? Are they located at quite high level? So that is why we are calling it as the high stationary stage. So first thing you can see, it is written both birth rate and death rate are found to be over 35 per thousand. Okay? Over 35 per thousand. And you can understand here, this is the stage of a primitive society. Okay? A society which is very primitive, which is essentially based upon agriculture. It is a society where technology was not so much developed. Okay? So controlling the birth rate is not possible at this point of time. Now the question arises, the death rate here is high. And what is the behavior of the death rate? Can we say it is erratic? Okay? So the behavior of mortality is erratic due to factors like variability in food supply and epidemics. Tell me, do we know that in the past periods, there was more frequent occurrence of problems like droughts, famines, epidemics? Okay? They used to occur more because ultimately our technology was not so much developed to control such problems. Okay? So why there is this erratic behavior? Because of frequent occurrence of these hazards, these problems, as a result of which, whenever suppose there is an epidemic or famine, what will happen with the death rate? It would increase and ultimately it would become comparatively less. Again it would increase. So there it is, thus it has a erratic behavior. बाद में देखेंगे हम जब mortality की बात करेंगे अलग से, then we'll talk about the epidemiological transition theory. ठीक है? So the epidemiological transition theory treats this stage as the age of pestilence and famines. ठीक है? So this period is basically what? It is the period of pestilence and famines. If you just want to write here also, you can just as a reminder, you can write that this is the period of, or this is the age of pestilence and famines. Age of pestilence and famines. ठीक है? So what happens in the age of pestilence and famines? Very important thing is that here infectious diseases are the primary model based upon the experience of the first world countries. ठीक है? तो फर्स्ट वर्ल्ड कंट्रीज में हम देखेंगे कि डेमोग्राफिक ट्रांजिशन स्टार्टेड ड्यूरिंग विच पीरियड इन 18th सेंचुरी. ठीक है? सो ये बिगिन हुआ जाकर के कब? 18th सेंचुरी में, या फिर हम कह सकते हैं उससे थोड़ा पहले, सम ऑफ द कंट्रीज. What was the very important thing which was related with this was the period you will be finding जब industrial revolution भी start हो गया. Now as the industrial revolution started, तो उसके साथ we'll later see कि industrialization और urbanization they are intricately linked to each other. जब industrialization होता है तो will there be setting up of factories? Yes or no? So when the factories would be set up, will they be able to attract large amount of labor? So जहां पर भी factories होंगी वहां पर क्या होगा? Urbanization बढ़ेगा, concentration of population would be increasing. So they are both linked to each other. So this was the period when ultimately there was growth of industrialization and urbanization. Now think, अगर हम जो एज ऑफ पेस्टिलेंस एंड फेमाइन की हमने बात की, जहां पर एपिडेमिक्स वर स्टिल प्रेजेंट, दे वर स्टिल प्रेवलेंट, when people were living in rural areas, the density of population was not so much high. ठीक है, but when they begin to live in cities, and you can understand कि starting में जो cities होंगी, what we see today, the condition of developing world and the slums, the same conditions would have existed in that period in the developed countries as well. ठीक है, so there would have been this threat of the spread of epidemics. ठीक है, सो अगर सपोज करो कि एपिडेमिक सिटीज में फैलता है, हु वुड बी एट लॉस? कैन आई से द इन्वेस्टर्स, द कैपिटलिस्ट, दे वुड बी एट लॉस. ऑल्सो देर विल बी प्रॉब्लम दैट अल्टीमेटली दे वुड हैव ऑल्सो लॉस ऑफ लेबर, लेबर का लॉस होगा. साथ ही साथ विल देर बी ऑल्सो थ्रेट दैट दे कैन ऑल्सो कैच दोज डिजीजेस. ठीक है, so there was so much of this kind of threat. So it was during this period that the governments began to ultimately invest in the development of medical technology. ठीक है, it was this, we are talking about the 18th century. The government started to invest in the medical technology. So उसकी वजह से फिर क्या होने लगा? As they began to invest in medical technology, they began to find the cure of many of these epidemic diseases, और ultimately उसकी वजह से the death rate slowly began to fall. ठीक है, it began to fall, and through this the transition started. So originally जब transition start होता है, तो how it can start? It starts with the technological development. इसका सीधा मतलब क्या है? Can I say this technological development, is it correlated with economic development? Yes or no? So death rate के fall होने का सीधा relation किससे है? It is related with economic development. ठीक है? So in the first world countries, it started with economic development, and thus which was followed by the medical technological development, death rate began to fall. देखेंगे however, in the other world, that is the second world and the third world countries, tell me, India में भी what has happened? There has been decline in the mortalities. ठीक है, डेथ रेट डिक्लाइन होने लगा. बाद में देखेंगे पेपर 2 में that in India it began to decline after 1921. ठीक है, 1921 के बाद डिक्लाइन होने लगा. टेल मी, क्या इंडिया का उस टाइम पर कोई इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट हुआ था? हार्डली, वेरी लो. वी वर स्टिल कॉलोनाइज्ड एट दैट पीरियड. ठीक है, सो हाउ देयर वाज द डेवलपमेंट ऑफ मेडिकल टेक्नोलॉजी? वी विल सी लेटर ऑन. देन in rest of the world, much of this medical technology was actually imported. ठीक है, it was actually imported. So बाद में देखेंगे कि ब्रिटिशर्स ने क्या किया. That was the period between First World War and Second World War. मॉडर्न हिस्ट्री में पढ़ा होगा. That was the period when the nationalist pressure was very high. ठीक है, so they were forced to do some developmental activities, and one of these developmental activities was that there was import of the medical technology. ठीक है, so either it can start with economic development, what I am trying to say, or this fall in death rate can also happen as a simply as a result of what? Diffusion of medical technology. अब अफ्रीका में भी there are countries which are very very poor. Economic development is at very low level. But what has happened? There is diffusion of medical technology. You must have heard about missionaries. ठीक है, we will later see that much of Africa south of Sahara is Christian. ठीक है, before it was not. How it has got converted to Christianity? Because of the missionary work. ठीक है, so through these missionaries what happened? The medical technology reached to the people, and ultimately that led to the decline in the death rate. ठीक है? So early expanding stage कैसे start होता है? It begins with the fall in the death rate. ठीक है? So death rate को हमने देखा, it is associated with economic development. But when it comes to fertility rate, it is not directly associated only with economic development. It is more associated with what? Socio-economic development. ठीक है? Social development is a very, very dominant factor which determines the fertility. ठीक है? So, can you understand that there can be places which might be economically very developed, but socially, if you actually look there, they can be clearly very backward. Northwest India, if you talk about, is a very classic example of a high economic development and comparatively not so much social development. There is always a gap of few years between the social and economic development. Always economic development generally comes first, which is followed by a gap of few decades, which where the social development would essentially follow. So what is happening here? In our diagram, you can see that there is the fall in the death rate taking place, but what is happening with the birth rate? Birth rate still remains high. And can you see the decline in the birth rate only starts at the end of the second stage. Okay? So that is the basic characteristic which we find what is taking place in this early expanding stage. So it is characterized by the beginning of the transition process, which starts with a decline in death rate. In fact, death rate sharply declines, and by the end of this stage, death rate reaches around 15 per thousand. 15 per thousand. This change is primarily brought about by improvement in health and sanitation, which is a function of economic and technological development. ठीक है? However, this change can also be brought about by import of medical technology, as has happened in case of the developing world. ठीक है? However, the birth rate remains high and it still is found to be over 30 per thousand. It is so because the decline in fertility is slow, as it is function of what? It is function of social development, and always there is time gap between economic and social development. Okay? As a result, population growth is rapid in this stage despite fertility begins to decline by the end of stage 2 or this stage. Okay? So here what is taking place? The population begins to grow at fast rate. Now, in the wake of high population growth, fears of population explosion are expressed and the problem of resource mobilization becomes significant. Industrialization and urbanization become important. Large family is no longer considered an asset. Thus, by end of stage 2, fertility also begins to decline. Okay? And if we talk about which countries are today located in this stage, the LDCs can be said to be the countries which are located in this stage of demographic transition. So least developed countries in the contemporary world are lying in this stage, like most of the sub-Saharan African countries, they're lying in this stage. Okay? So this is stage 2. Then after that, it is followed by stage 3, late expanding stage. धीरे धीरे अल्टीमेटली लार्ज फैमिली का मतलब यहाँ पर यह है कि स्लोली पीपल विल रियलाइज दैट हैविंग मोर चिल्ड्रन is not beneficial. ठीक है? So because of that, what will happen? The family size will begin to reduce. That is what it means. But this will be becoming effective when? It would become effective in the later stage of the second stage, later part of the second stage. ठीक है, इनफैक्ट इसी चीज को मैं एक्सप्लेन करने जा रहा था. नाउ why we are separating stage 2 from stage 3, because stage 3 में very clearly now there is also fall of fertility. ठीक है, so what are the factors which are triggering this fall of fertility? बहुत सारे factors होते हैं, but most important factor is the falling death rate. ठीक है, so ultimately what happens is the death rate falls to so much lower level. अभी हमने क्या देखा था, by the end of this stage death rate कहां तक fall हो गया था, 15 per thousand, yes or no? So it has fallen now to such a lower level that people now begin to realize, ठीक है, कि if they have more number of children, what is the probability of all of them surviving? It is high. ठीक है, पहले क्या होता था कि यू हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड, अगर हम मोर्टालिटी की बात करें तो मोर्टालिटी इज समथिंग लाइक दिस. दिस इज द एज ब्रैकेट्स, सो 0 to 15, 65. And if we talk about mortality, generally can we say mortality is something like this? The mortality rates are something like this. ठीक है, सबसे ज्यादा मोर्टालिटी किस में होती है, वेरी ओल्ड एज जो लोग हो जाते हैं वहां पे मोर्टालिटी हाई है. देन कैन वी से व्हेन यू आर अ चाइल्ड और इन्फेंट, योर फिजियोलॉजिकल कैपेसिटीज आर वेरी लो. ठीक है, so that time the threat of catching diseases and others is very high, so the mortality is higher at that period. ठीक है, in fact old times में, अभी तो कंट्रोल हो गया है, but old times it used to be quite high. ठीक है, so now think that earlier it was like this, then what will be the probability of a child which was born, what will be the probability of that child to survive? It will be lower. ठीक है, so if you want at least 2 children to survive, ठीक है, कम से कम 2 चिल्ड्रन हो जो सर्वाइव करें. Why do 2 children? Because हो सकता है एक लात मार के भगा देगा बुढ़ापे में. ठीक है, कम से कम दूसरा तो he'll take care. So at least the probability for at least 2 child to survive, it was found, some calculations, research were done, and it was found that at those high levels of mortality, it should have been somewhere between 10 to 12 children. If you are birthing, then ultimately what will happen, there was probability that 2 to 3 children would be surviving, because you have to take into account other factor, that of the status of women. ठीक है, because women will be what, would be born and ultimately would have to go to the husband household. People want 2 male child to survive. ठीक है, so ये सारी probabilities को calculate करके at least 10 to 12 children होने चाहिए. You are burning, then what will happen, there was probability that 2 male children would be essentially surviving. ठीक है, so now think, अगर ये mortality fall down हो जाती है and you are still having 10 12 छोड़ दो, 7 8, ठीक है, 6, तो even during my age when I was a child, I have seen so many people in my village having 6 children, 7 children. ये तो बहुत common था. ठीक है, so think about now, when the mortality has fallen down, if you are having 7 8 children, can I say the probability of all of them surviving or majority of them surviving would be high? And that is what, that is an additional burden for the people. ठीक है, so once the mortality rate has fallen to that level, then what will happen, people will begin to realize that now most of the children are surviving, and actually what is happening, it is becoming a burden. But ये realization होने में, ये पूरा जो decade होता है, it would take around 3 to 4 decades time period. ठीक है, so after 3 to 4 decades, what we will be finding, that ultimately the fertility would also begin to decline. ये realization हो जाएगा. अभी हम बाद में बात करेंगे मोर्टालिटी रिवर्सल्स की. रिसेंट टाइम्स में You must have, we have already seen COVID-19, but do we find that Africa mein there is a very strong spread of HIV? There are so many such epidemic diseases which are spreading fast in many of these least developed countries, and mortality because of that is again becoming quite high. So think, अगर mortality इतने high level पर है, तो does this means that there is chance that fertility, it would not reach to that low level and fertility would remain at this higher level? ठीक है? So we'll talk about this later on कि अफ्रीका में बहुत problematic situation है. If it continues like this, Africa will become the second most populous continent of this earth and it would have huge population numbers. ठीक है? Whatever, but ultimately if you have been successful in making this death rate fall, then what will happen? There would also be decline in the fertility. ठीक है? जब हम इंडियन पॉपुलेशन पॉलिसी की बात करेंगे तो यू कैन अंडरस्टैंड स्टार्टिंग में आवर फर्टिलिटी कंट्रोल पॉलिसी वाज देयर एंड यू नो सेवरल स्टेप्स वर टेकन. इमरजेंसी की कहानियां सुनी होंगी तुम लोगों ने, व्हाट दे डिड इन इमरजेंसी. फोर्सफुल वेज वर यूज्ड. व्हाटएवर biggest problem, उसके बाद भी we saw that our population continued to grow at very fast rate because they didn't understood the demographic transition model. A simple demographic transition would tell you what you had to do till you also attach welfare of the people in your population policy. Make it part and parcel of that. Till then, fertility is not going to decline no matter what you do. Because fertility is essentially what? It is a individualistic decision. It is decision taken by the individuals. ठीक है? So what essentially happened यहाँ पर? Fertility begins to decline in this stage 3. So this is the essential characteristic of the late expanding state. ठीक है? Now tell me, late expanding state में क्या हो रहा है कि fertility is beginning to decline, but till the population continues to grow. ठीक है? क्या रीजन हो सकता है? Can I say stage 2 में this was the population base in stage 2? ठीक है? So if this was the population stage, then and it was growing at X rate. ठीक है? So there was some growth, but after 3 to 4 decades, this has become the population base. So even if the rate of growth is X minus Y%, can I say that still because the population base is large, what will be the total addition in the number of people? It would still remain high. ठीक है? For example, अगर इसका एक छोटा सा example दूं, इंडिया में if you look into 2001 census का अगर हम डाटा देखें, तो in 2001 census, the growth rate of population, decadal growth rate of population was around 21%. ठीक है? Little above 21%. In 10 years, the total population growth was above 21%. In absolute numbers, it was 182 million people. ठीक है? But what happened in 2011? We find that this rate declined to 17 point something %. ठीक है? So कितने परसेंटेज का डिक्लाइन हुआ? Almost 4% डिक्लाइन. Now predict कितना ग्रोथ हुआ होगा? Population growth. There was some decline, but it was 181 million people. Still we added, despite 4% down population, decadal population growth, we still added 181 million people to our population. So why it was so? Because the population base had become larger. I hope you get my point. ठीक है? So stage 3 में क्या होता है? That although there is decline in fertility, but by this time the population base has become larger, and as a result of this, what we will be finding that the population would still continue to grow. So this stage is characterized by medium fertility levels of about 20 per thousand. Such a decline in fertility is caused by social development which follows the economic development. Mortality death rate further declines to 10 per thousand. As a result of decreasing gap between birth rate and death rate, population growth rate is less rapid than in stage 2. However, by this time, many of the countries would have acquired a large population base. Thus, huge increase in absolute numbers makes even modest growth rate very considerable. ठीक है? Decline in birth rate is primarily associated with change in economic structure, which in turn brings social development. During this period, there is high industrialization and urbanization, along with better individuation and awareness, increasing participation of women in economy, consumption of luxury goods, and weakening of the grip of religion on the society. In the contemporary world, few countries of the second world and many countries of the third world are present in this stage. Mostly now the countries which are present are the third world countries, और उसमें कौन सी countries हैं? Developing countries. ठीक है? Developing countries are present in this stage 3. ठीक है? So some of the former Soviet Union republics like Kazakhstan can be said to be in this stage. India, China, Brazil, all of these are in this stage. China reached stage 3 by 1980s, while India reached by 1990. Okay? So this is the stage 3 of demographic transition. At the end of the stage 3, what happens? The transition is completed. Okay? So the transition becomes complete at the end of stage 3. And finally, we enter into the fourth stage, that is the low stationary stage. Okay? So you can understand low stationary stage क्यों बोल रहे हैं इसको? Because the population again becomes stationary and it is now located where? At lower level. Both birth rate and death rate are located at lower level. Okay? So what we find? Both birth rate and death rate are low in this stage, around 10 per thousand and 12 per thousand respectively. Thus, natural increase in population is low. ये उल्टा हो गया actually. It should be, the birth rate should be 12 and this should be 10. ठीक है? Leading to either stable or slowly growing population. The birth rate is low fluctuating. देखा था हमने? In the later part, what is the nature of the birth rate? Can you see? Now, here the death rate was fluctuating. Here what is happening? It is the birth rate which is fluctuating. Okay? I'll explain you what is the reason for that. So tell me, when we are talking about the market economies, because if you remember, as I told you, this theory was based upon the demographic experience of which countries? The first world countries, which are based upon the market economy. So now tell me, do we find that in market economies, the economic growth follows a cyclic model? Yes or no? Are there cycles present in the economy? Can we say there is boom and there can be economic depressions? ये cyclic होता है in capitalistic economies. So if you go into the Keynes theory, he explains how actually basically this happens. In every passing time period, what happens? The saving, जो classical model of economics था, उसमें क्या assume होता था? All the saving is invested. ठीक है? But after 1930s में जो depression आया, great economic depression, again we had to rethink our economic theory. And it was ultimately formulated by Keynes, the new classical economics, and he was of the view that what happens, the assumption that all the saving is invested is not true. That means part of the saving is not invested. It is not going into the productive investment. That means with time, what is happening? There will be increasing unemployment and lowering spending capacity of the people. And this keeps on accumulating over a period of time, and that ultimately becomes an economic depression. So in market based economies, in capitalistic societies, always economy works in this manner. Now think, we are talking about such society, a very advanced society, where most of the people by this time, tell me, what will be the structure of the society? Families will be which type? Combined or nuclear? Most of the families will be nuclear families. People will be highly conscious of their status, of their growth, their personal growth. Okay? So during this period, tell me, can we say people will have children only when they think that they have achieved economic prosperity? Okay? So during the periods of depression, what will happen with the fertility? People will postpone fertility decisions for the future. So those periods would coincide with the low fertility. When there is recovery of the economy, then people will think this is the correct time to have children. So ultimately, with the behavior of the economy, what will happen? There will also be the behavior, same erratic behavior would be seen in the fertility. Okay? So this is the reason why you find that in the stage 4, there is such fluctuating fertility is found. Such a fluctuating nature is primarily result of fluctuations in the economy. In the economy. In fact, some countries adopt policy of population increase, leading to increase in birth rate. Okay? So some of the countries have tried pro-natal policies. Okay? So ये pro-natal policies basically क्या करती हैं? They will give lots of incentives to people to have more number of children. Okay? That is basically the pro-natal policies. But think about the present couples. It is established in their mind that they have to be free. And what does having children means? It is a very strong burden. Okay? So they are very sure that they will have one child or two child maximum. Okay? They have decided this is about their future. So suppose a couple has decided that they will have one child. And that time government announces some incentives. Earlier they had decided that they'll have the child after some years, 2 years, 3 years. But suppose government ने कोई incentive announce कर दिया, which you'll be getting as if you are, for example, several type of maternity benefits can be given to women. So suppose government announces such incentives, can I say they can prepone their fertility decision? And many people will prepone their fertility decision. So what will happen? Can I say that would be the period which would coincide with baby boom? Yes or no? So there will be baby booms, but they have already taken their decision of fertility. उनको एक ही child चाहिए था, and that has already happened. So this baby boom, can I say in the next decade, it is very high chance that it would be followed by a baby burst. A baby burst period. So again, what will happen with the fertility? The fertility would become this kind of erratic. Okay? So this is the behavior of fertility in stage 4. Obviously, in this stage, the country is highly industrialized and urbanized. Technological know-how is abundant. Deliberate control on family size is a norm. High literacy and high labor specialization, etc., are the features of the society. In short, the country lies in the age of high mass consumption. We'll later study Rostow model. So Rostow model में economic growth की last stage कौन सी है? It is this stage of age of high mass consumption. So it has reached to the last stage of economic development, the society. ठीक है. सो वेरी क्लियरली इसमें कौन सी कंट्रीज लाई करती हैं? इट इज द फर्स्ट वर्ल्ड कंट्रीज प्लस which other countries? Second world European countries. Second world European countries कौन सी हैं? Those which were part of the Soviet Union, mostly the Eastern European countries. ठीक है. So this is the stage 4 of demographic transition. Now coming to stage 5. Stage 5 of demographic transition. So why we are talking, first question is why we are talking about stage 5. So very important thing about this stage 5 is that since the period of 1970s onward, it has been seen that there has been further changes in the demographic experience of the first world countries. ठीक है, so इसको लिख लो. Since 1970s, further changes have occurred in the demographic experience of the developed countries, that is the first world countries, and even some second world. Okay. So now let us see what are the changes which have essentially occurred. So first, if we talk about in these countries, the death rate. We are first talking about the death rate. So, लिखो इसमें. Since 1970s, these countries have seen concerted drives. Concerted means focused drives to bring down mortality further. Full stop. This has been achieved by further investment in medical technology, as well as spreading awareness with respect to a healthy living style. ठीक है. You can understand movies are the mirrors of society. ठीक है. So have you seen in recent times some Hollywood movies where the theme is that they have developed some kind of technology to reverse aging? देखा है? So what has been the big problem in the developed world? एक बहुत बड़ा problem था. First World War और Second World War में these countries completed their transition. ठीक है, between First and Second World War. Now some of the countries, some pioneer countries, उसी समय they realized that if the fertility continues to fall like this, we are in for a very big problem in future. Okay? So they began, some of the pioneer countries like Italy, Germany, Scandinavian nations, they started to have a pro-natal policy. That means pro-fertility policy. जो incentives की बात हमने बताई, they started to have that policy. However, in some decades, 2 to 3 decades, they realized that these policies are ineffective. There might be those booms, but those booms would be followed by what? Baby bursts. So average fertility kya hogi? It will remain low. In fact, it continued to decline. Okay? Now the question was कि अगर ये continued to decline होता रहा, who will be working in future? There will be very less people who will be left ultimately to work in future. There will be labor crisis. One solution is you allow migrants. But if you are allowing too many migrants, what will happen with the ethnicity? It would change. Okay? So they were facing a very, very big dilemma. Can you understand that also, you know, that most of these white people, they are also very, very racist. Okay? So definitely they don't want that ethnic change. So one solution that came to their mind was that today we know that the average retirement period is around 50 to 60 years के आसपास होता है. ठीक है? What if we can extend this retirement period? What if people can remain healthy for longer period than this 60 years? ठीक है? Have you seen people like Anil Kapoor? One can remain healthy for longer period of time. So ultimately this was the period. What they did, they began to invest more in such technologies where the aging process can be slowed down. And also it was understood that lifestyle has lot to do with the phenomena of aging. Okay? So ultimately as an outcome of this, what will begin to take place? Will there be fall in death rate? Definitely the death rate has begun to fall. ठीक है? In fact, अगर आज की डेट में developed world में जाओ, before if you go 1960s, 70s, 80s, you'll find कि सब all of them would have tested cocaine and everything. ठीक है? कोई बचा नहीं होता था. However, the present white population of today, it is very, very aware. ठीक है? And they are trying to at least get away from such bad habits or bad living styles. ठीक है? So आगे लिखो. As a result, the mortality began to fall to even lower level, to stop. Much of this fall in mortality has been in the 40 plus age group. 40 plus age group. ठीक है? So living style से जो mortalities which are taking place, can I say they would be taking place in 40 plus age group category में ही होगा? Because till 40 actually physiologically you are strong. ठीक है? So even if you have bad habits, you will not notice, your body will take care of it because you are physically strong. Obviously ये वाले लोग अभी वो bad habits में आते नहीं हैं. ठीक है? Here your body is quite strong, but normally it is seen beyond 40, your body ultimately the body strength begins to decline. You might have seen most of the footballers, उनका retirement age क्या होता है? Around 35 के बाद they are ultimately going away from the most professional football, that is European football. So वो fringe leagues में खेलने लगते हैं. by end of 40 almost most of them begin to retire. ठीक है? So physically it is proven that our physiological capacities begin to decline from here. And ultimately, so what has happened now? There has been decline in this mortality rate. Okay? So this is one demographic change which has taken place. So overall mortality has declined in the developed countries. Then next पर आते हैं. Birth rate. So see what essentially has happened in the first world, the market oriented capitalistic world, that there has been development of very high levels of individualism. Okay? So individualism has become the most dominating philosophy today. Individual growth, individual progress is the most important thing that matters for people and not the societal goals. Okay? As a result of which, what has taken place? The birth rate has continued to fall. Okay? It has essentially continued to fall. And ultimately, the birth rate has become even lower than that very low death rate. Okay? So, लिख लो, the modern developed society, the modern developed society, society is governed by high levels of individualism. High levels of individualism. Full stop. As a result, the societal goal of fertility has been far left behind. Full stop. This has resulted into further falls in birth rate and fertility levels. ठीक है? For example, in Europe, 2015, the fertility levels were already to 1.6. ठीक है? Total fertility had declined to 1.6 in 2015 की मैं बात कर रहा हूँ, and it has further declined afterwards. Replacement level of fertility कितना होता है? It is 2.1. ठीक है? So can you imagine so much lower level of fertility? So full stop. आगे लिखो. As a result of this fall, the fertility has gone below the death rates or the mortality. Full stop. Thus, the population growth rate has become negative. The population growth rate has become negative. ठीक है? So this is the reason. Can we say this scenario is something which is unseen? It was not known when the demographic transition model was formulated. So this is something new to the world, and that is why it has been suggested that we should add stage 5 to demographic transition. So लिख लो इसको. Such a scenario was unseen. When the demographic transition was formulated, or demographic transition theory was formulated. Full stop. Thus, it has been suggested that there is a need to add a fifth stage in the demographic transition model. ठीक है. So here someone is saying नेमार का लास्ट वर्ल्ड कप होगा. नेमार का तो पता नहीं, बट सैडली मेसी का तो डेफिनेटली लगता है कि इट वुड बी लास्ट. ठीक. हाँ. They will continue to try. He's asking that in recent times, and it is not only recent times, they have tried this many times before. Okay, so what will be the impact on fertility? The pro-natal policy, several incentives are being given. History tells us, and history never lies, history tells us that once the fertility begins to decline, it has not been found that fertility increases. ठीक है. This is the demographic history of the world. ठीक है. So they can try. एक ही कंट्री जिससे मुझे थोड़ा भरोसा है जो चेंज करने वाला है या कर सकता है, इट इज ओनली वन कंट्री, यू नो, चाइना. ठीक है. ऑल्दो you know that even China tried to do this. China relaxed its one child policy. ठीक है. The recent, बाद में बात करेंगे, we'll talk about that. The recent data shows that despite all the incentives and relaxations given, even in China, the fertility has continued to decline. ठीक है. वहां पर भी fertility जो levels हैं, they are reaching to 1.8 and 1.7, the TFR levels. So it has continued to decline. So it is, as I told you, these experimentations started between First and Second World War. तब से वो कर रहे हैं, but it has not yielded any benefits. It might lead to those short baby booms periods. But again, research has found that baby boom periods are always separated by the baby burst. And ultimately, because of that, the average remains same or it becomes further lower. ठीक है. So that is the thing. It is something like you can understand कि सपोज करो कि तुम्हें एक लग्जरी की आदत हो गई लाइफ में. ठीक है. सो लाइक फॉर एग्जाम्पल, पहले जब मैं पढ़ाने जाता था तो आई यूज टू ड्राइव माई ओन कार एंड आई यूज टू गो. अब मेरे पास ड्राइवर है. सो आई एम नाउ यूज टू लग्जरी. अब मुझे कोई बोल दे कि यार चले जाओ ड्राइव करके, आई फील लाइक आई डोंट वांट टू ड्राइव. So once you get used to certain kinds of luxury, what happens? You don't want to leave them. Once you get used to certain kinds of freedom, ultimately you don't want to lose such freedoms. ठीक है. So ये वैसी ही बात होती है जैसे हिंदी में एक कहावत है, मुंह में खून लगना. ठीक है. कि ultimately you get used to such things and you don't want to leave them. So when couples get used to such kind of freedoms, they don't want to take more burdens. Okay, it is something like that. Because fertility, no doubt, it is what, as our society structure has changed, okay, fertility has become more of a private affair, individual couples affair. पहले की situation अलग होती थी. पहले there used to be joint families who used to take the decisions. There used to be, the society used to be more religious. ठीक है. Today what is happening, there is development of more secular societies. ठीक है. For example, if I ask you, when was the last time you people went to a temple? स्पेशली टेम्पल की कोई काम करने जा रहे हैं और इसलिए जाकर के मंदिर में माथा टेक करके आते हैं. When was the last time? Earlier it used to be every day. ठीक है. So what has happened in society? The role of religion, the influence of religion also has happened. What declined? बाद में देखेंगे. This is referred to as the phenomena of secularization. ठीक है, which is progressing fast in the society. So this is, there several factors are there which ultimately are ensuring that the fertility is declining. ठीक है. So I hope it is clear what is demographic transition now. So stage 5 of the demographic transition. Stage 5 वाला जो मैंने क्वेश्चन कराया है, we will see that this question has been asked in various forms. ठीक है. Like एक क्वेश्चन पूछा था Japan and other countries, their demographic, what are the demographic experiences they are having. So it has been asked in different forms. So that is the stage 5 of demographic transition. अब देखो demographic transition में हमने क्या पढ़ा? There is fall in death rate, it is followed by fall in birth rate, and there is also a third thing. Okay, and what was that third thing? There is simultaneous changes in the socio-economic structure of the society. Okay, so demographic transition is a model which will be our main model to solve many questions which would be coming in the examination. It will give us the framework. ठीक है, तो वो frameworks देखते हैं. So one thing we can see that with demographic transition, there is, can we say there is death transition taking place? Yes or no? Then there is also fertility transition. Fertility transition is also occurring. Now think, if mortality or death transition is taking place and fertility transition is also taking place, will there be also age transition? Age structure of the society, will it change? Obviously होगा, देखते हैं अभी. So there is also simultaneous age transition taking place. We will see that along with this, there are other forms of transition, like there is migration transition also occurs. Other forms of transitions are also taking place, like there is urban transition is also taking place. ठीक है. Then there is also economic transition taking place. Others also we can think of, like for example, family and household transition. Family and household transition also occurs. ठीक है. So along with demographic transition, can we say there are several transitions inbuilt in the demographic transition model? Some have been made more explicit, while the others are not so much explicit. Okay? So let us see one by one how these transitions are taking place. So first we are going to talk about the age transition of the society. this is stage 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. ठीक है. सो स्टेज 1 में क्या होगा? इफ यू हैव स्पेस ऑन द पेज, आइडियली क्या करना है, जो एज पिरामिड विच आई एम गोइंग टू मेक, यू मेक हियर ओनली. ठीक है. आई कैन मेक हियर, बट बहुत सारे लोगों को दिखेगा नहीं, इसलिए मैं अगले पेज पे बनाऊंगा. So let us talk about the stage 1 first. So in stage 1, the age pyramid is something like this. It is something like this. Okay. So there is the male and there is the female. And these are the age brackets we are talking about. Okay. So the pyramid, the age pyramid is what type? It is flattest at the base and it tapers upward, continuously tapers upward. ठीक है. सो दिस इज स्टेज 1 में एज ट्रांजिशन होता है, एज स्ट्रक्चर. देन इन स्टेज 2 it would be something like this. It is quite similar. This is the stage 2. Then this is the age structure or the age pyramid in stage 3. So this is happening in stage 4. It becomes more like a cylinder. यहाँ पे बनाते समय एक चीज ध्यान रखना है. Towards male, can you see it is narrower? Towards female, it is little bit, there is more population in the old age. बाद में देखेंगे, we call it as the feminization of population, because normally women's life expectancy is higher. ठीक है. So surprise surprise, biologically women are stronger than men. It is true. So that is फोर. एक्चुअली मैंने इसमें सारे में हाइट को यू हैव टू जस्ट बराबर रखना एटलीस्ट व्हेन यू आर ड्राइंग. देन So this is the age pyramid that is present in stage 5. है ना फीमेल्स के टर्म्स में 4 और 5 दोनों में the extension of female section would be in both 4 and 5. So ठीक है. So this is the age pyramid or the age structure which is formed. अब देखते हैं इसको एक एक एक्सप्लेन करते हैं. In stage 1, ठीक है, there are two factors, fertility and mortality. दो factors हैं. Can we say in stage 1 both are high? ठीक है. So there are lots of children born. ठीक है. So जो ये 0 से 5 की जो कैटेगरी है, टेल मी, lots of children are born, but some of them are surviving. Can we say that some of them would cross the 5 years age mark? Remember, this is the period when lots of famines, epidemics, pandemics are taking place. Food insecurity is present. So the ones which would be crossing between 5 to, suppose we say 15, they would become even less. ठीक है. 15 plus age group में there will be more number of people who would die. So ultimately what will happen? It would become further tapering. As you keep on going, more and more people would be dying, less people will be surviving, and thus what happens? It keeps on becoming tapering. I hope it is clear. So it will be, what will be the nature of the age pyramid? It will be broadest at the base and continuously becomes narrow upward. ठीक है. So it will be broadest at the base and continuously narrows upward. ठीक है. So this is the stage 1. अब stage 2 में आते हैं. ठीक है. Now think, here did we saw that in this there was fall in mortality, and what was happening by the end of the second stage? This is a diagram which represents the end, near the end of second stage. So what was happening near the end of second stage? Fertility was also declining. ठीक है. Fertility was also declining. So think कि suppose there were people in, just I am taking random year, 1950, ठीक है, each of the couples were still having 8 children. ठीक है. In, suppose I am just taking random figures to explain. But this was the period when the mortality had declined to that significantly lower level. ठीक है. जाते जाते almost by 1960, this idea now began to diffuse. This information begins to diffuse that if you have so many children, what will be the problem? Most of them would be surviving, and the burden that you will have to face would be very large. But इस आइडिया को स्प्रेड होने में कितने साल लग गए? 10 साल लग गए लोगों तक पहुंचने में. Ideas takes time in spreading. The information of diffusion is a slow process normally. So it took almost 10 years. ठीक है. So tell me, जो लोग 1950 में born हुए थे, this was the 1950. Most of them survived. And can I say now they are located here? So the bulge has moved upward. But by 1960 में क्या हुआ? Now the people have begun to produce less number of children because the awareness has spread. So suppose here there is 6, the fertility is 6. So what has happened at the base? The fertility has become lower. ठीक है, बट जो पहले बॉर्न हुए वाले लोग थे, which was larger in number and most of them survived because of the fall in the mortalities, now that bulge has moved upward. ठीक है, बट स्टिल ये बल्ज किस में होगा? इट विल बी इन द 0 to 15 कैटेगरी. ठीक है, उसी में होगा. सो इट इज स्टिल द चाइल्ड एज ग्रुप वेयर दिस बल्ज वुड बी फाउंड. So here what we are finding in the second stage, the pyramid, the age pyramid लिख लो, the age pyramid is still broader at the base or near base. And tapers upward. Full stop. However, tapers upward. However, the bulge has now moved. The bulge has now moved upward from the infant to children age group. Earlier it was in the infant age group. Now it has moved to the children age group. ठीक है, सो आई होप इट इज क्लियर कि ये ऐसा पिरामिड क्यों बन गया. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट स्टेज में अब इट बिकम्स इजियर टू अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट इज हैपनिंग. नेक्स्ट स्टेज में द बेस हैज बिकम इवन लेस वाइड. दैट मीन्स व्हाट हैज हैपेंड? फर्टिलिटी हैज कंटिन्यूड टू डिक्लाइन. बल्ज हैज ऑल्सो लिटिल बिट नैरोड. इतना ज्यादा नहीं है जितना यहां पे था. वाई? बिकॉज नॉट ऑल द पीपल विल बी सर्वाइविंग. जो 1950 में बॉर्न हुए थे, नॉट ऑल पीपल विल बी सर्वाइविंग इन दिस अप रीचिंग अप टू दिस एज ग्रुप. ठीक है, बट व्हाट वी फाइंड, वेयर इज द बल्ज लोकेटेड नाउ? इन द वर्किंग एज ग्रुप. ठीक है, so this is, we'll see later, this is also we call it as the demographic dividend. ठीक है, because there is more number of people in the working age group. यहां पर क्या था? There was lesser number of people in the working age group and there were more dependents. ठीक है, dependency ratio here was higher, but here what has happened? There is lowering of the dependency ratio. There are more people who are working now. ठीक है, सो दैट इज स्टेज 3. इसमें लिख लो, द बल्ज नाउ मूव्स इन द वर्किंग एज ग्रुप. leading to development of demographic dividend. Leading to the development of demographic dividend. Fertility further declines. ठीक है, now think, when we are talking about stage 4 of demographic transition, what did I tell you about the people's physiology? What happens to the people after 40 years of age? Normally you'll find that lots of people will not survive beyond 45, 50. ठीक है, so still we haven't been able to discover the biological reasons of this. It is something in the genetics, the advantageous genes or whatever it is. ठीक है, so most of the people ultimately would not be surviving beyond 40, 50. मुश्किल होता है, it is very difficult. ठीक है, so ultimately when this bulge which we are talking about, when it is going beyond that 40, 50 age above, when the people who are born in 1950, when they are now becoming 40 plus, 50 plus, can I say even less number of them would survive? ठीक है, So what will happen to the bulge? Will it remain? The bulge will not remain, and the age pyramid becomes which type? More cylindrical. Okay, it would become more cylindrical. So during this period, लिख लो, the age pyramid becomes more cylindrical. More cylindrical, and the bulge is gone. आगे लिखो. Aging as a phenomena becomes significant. Full stop. Feminization of population also begins with aging. Feminization of population also begins with aging. Okay, so this is the age for. In this period, still what we find, there are more number of people in the working age group अभी भी. ठीक है, बट यहां पर क्या हो गया? The aging has highly deepened. You can see what is the now the nature of the pyramid. It has become broader at the top. Fertility has become what? It has become very low. ठीक है, जो अभी हम स्टेज 5 की बात कर रहे थे. सो लिख लो इसमें भी, द एजिंग हैज डीपेंड. द एजिंग हैज डीपेंड. The pyramid becomes broader at the top. Full stop. Fertility becomes very low. Fertility becomes very low. ठीक है, सो जो हमने बात की थी स्टेज 5 में, जो डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज में मेडिकल चेंजेस हो रहे हैं, can we see that actually what is taking place? Now we find that there are more number of people who are able to cross 60 plus 80 plus एज क्रॉस करने वाले लोग अब ज्यादा हैं. ठीक है, पहले ज्यादातर कौन से इस तरह के लोग थे? दोज हु वर जेनेटिकली वेरी स्ट्रांग. ठीक है, एंड पहले जो इस तरह के लोग जो 80 क्रॉस करते थे, उनसे तो घर वाले भी परेशान हो जाते थे कि व्हेन दिस, ये बुढ़ा कब जाएगा. But now we will be finding, because of the medical facilities and the care that is available, what we find that more number of people are actually becoming the centenarians. ठीक है, such population is on the rise. And again it is, we'll see बाद में जब हम aging को अलग से पढ़ेंगे in demography, so we'll see that it has become what? It has become a very very big issue for the world to deal with. Developed world में तो it is very very big issue. ठीक है, जब डेवलपिंग वर्ल्ड में, लाइक फॉर एग्जांपल चाइना एंड इंडिया में भी ये शुरू होगा, इंडिया में आफ्टर 2-3 डिकेड्स विल आल्सो बी बिगिनिंग टू फेस दिस प्रॉब्लम. ठीक है, चाइना इज ऑलरेडी, इट इज एक्सपेक्टेड दैट इन जस्ट 1 डिकेड द प्रॉब्लम विल बिगिन इन चाइना एज वेल. ठीक है, डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज में द सोशल सिक्योरिटी इज स्ट्रांग एंड पॉवर्टी वॉज लेसर. सो पीपल हु आर बिकमिंग ओल्ड, उनके पास कुछ सेविंग्स हैं. ठीक है, बट डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज की क्या हालत है? पीपल, मोस्ट ऑफ द पीपल आर पुअर. ठीक है, एंड व्हेन मोस्ट ऑफ द पीपल आर पुअर एंड दीज पीपल बिकम ओल्ड, कैन यू अंडरस्टैंड द बर्डन द गवर्नमेंट विल हैव? एंड वो जो हमारे सारे जो सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट गोल्स, पॉवर्टी लो करना, एटसेट्रा एटसेट्रा, वो सब धरे के धरे रह जाएंगे. इट इज गोइंग टू हैपन. ठीक है, सो दिस इज द एज स्ट्रक्चर. Japan? Yes, yes, Japan is in 5th stage. Germany is in 5th stage. Italy, many of the second world countries, East European countries का जब बाद में देखेंगे, their population growth has become negative. Russia's population growth has become negative. ठीक है, So I was asked yesterday, I asked someone, किससे पूछा था कि are you married? I think say you were. So Russians are inviting Indians. There are too many women there. Okay. So if you talk about, अब इसी के basis पे, if I just also tell you here about the dependency ratio, ठीक है? So normally dependency ratio कैसा होगा? It would be high, ठीक है? सेकेंड स्टेज में ये डिपेंडेंसी रेशियो और बढ़ जाता है बिकॉज मोर नंबर ऑफ चिल्ड्रन आर नाउ सर्वाइविंग, ठीक है? सो इट विल फर्दर इंक्रीज, but by the end of second stage what will happen with this dependency ratio? It will begin to decline because we are reaping the demographic dividend. More number of people are located in the working age group, ठीक है? So it continues to decline, but by the end of third stage what again begins to happen with the dependency ratio? फिर से ये बढ़ने लगता है. It continues to rise throughout stage 4 and stage 5. ठीक है? So this is the manner in which the dependency ratio is present. So still we are in stage 3. अभी इंडिया किस में है? Stage 3 में. We'll see. And we are reaping that demographic dividend. Unfortunately, we are unable to give jobs to our population. We are unable to convert it into human resource. ठीक है? बाद में एक कंसेप्ट पढ़ेंगे, डेमोग्राफिक फटीग. So what has happened? It seems like there is development of a demographic fatigue. In many countries it has happened. Demographic fatigue का मतलब है the population becomes so large and government begins to ultimately give up कि अब कुछ कर नहीं सकते. Did we saw such kind of demographic fatigue in COVID-19? When the people were migrating, government ultimately it was like they gave up. ठीक है? So there is something kind of demographic fatigue which has developed. Okay. So this is the age transition which is taking place. World में हम age को demography में अलग से भी पढ़ेंगे. I am just telling you how to write or how to use demographic transition theory. ठीक है? Can we say कि हम इसमें classify कर सकते हैं कौन कौन सी countries कौन सी stage में होंगी और उनका age structure कैसा मिलना चाहिए? ठीक है? So that is one. Then we were talking about migration transition. Migration transition. So if you talk about stage 1, what should be the level of migration in stage 1? It will be generally very low. ठीक है? It will be low. या फिर इसको हम very low लिख सकते हैं. It would be very low. ठीक है? बाद में we'll be studying about migration theories and we will see one of the laws given by Lee, and he says that the economic structure determines the migration levels. ठीक है? If there is uniformity of economic structure, what will be happening with migration levels? It will be lower. ठीक है? Uniformity of economic structure मतलब suppose हर जगह पर agriculture ही हो रहा है. Everywhere there is presence of subsistence agriculture. So why people will be migrating? Because people are essentially migrating for what? They are migrating for improving their living standards. ठीक है? In search of jobs. So if at one place there is subsistence agriculture, other place also same, the jobs would be lower at that place also. ठीक है? So in stage 1 what we find, the migration is essentially at lower level. Majority of migration जो होता है बाद में देखेंगे, it is social reasons की वजह से होता है, and this is mainly related with our culture of marriage where women change the household, and it is short distance migration. But when it comes to medium and long distance migration, ये हमेशा कैसा होगा? In stage 1 it will be very low. ठीक है? When we are talking about stage 2, now tell me, in stage 2 did we find that there was population growth taking place at very fast rate? ठीक है? And if population growth begins to take place at very fast rate, people are located here. This is the level of resource and population is growing now. Can I say ultimately there is development of, slowly there is development of overpopulation? Yes or no? So from this overpopulated region, will people begin to or try to find new areas which will be either underpopulated or at least there is optimum population in those areas? There will be more opportunities. Okay. So what happens? It is in stage 2, along with demographic transition, what also starts? Migration transition also begins. Okay. So here there is the beginning of migration transition. माइग्रेशन ट्रांजिशन, ठीक है। और इस बिगनिंग ऑफ माइग्रेशन ट्रांजिशन में बाद में देखेंगे सबसे ज़्यादा जो माइग्रेशन होता है दैट इज रूरल टू रूरल, बट देर इज नाउ ऑल्सो बिगनिंग ऑफ रूरल टू अर्बन माइग्रेशन बिकॉज फ्यू सिटीज, इंडस्ट्रियल सिटीज, दे विल बिगिन टू कम अप, ठीक है। देन व्हाट हैपन्स, देयर इज स्टेज 3 and stage 3 में the internal migration accelerates, ठीक है। internal migration accelerates in stage 3, ठीक है। और इस पीरियड में जो सबसे स्ट्रॉन्ग जो माइग्रेशन होता है दैट इज रूरल टू अर्बन and also urban to urban. Urban to urban. So towards big cities, people are also moving from small cities towards big cities. So rural to urban and urban to urban. अब ये दो मॉडल्स बाद में देखेंगे. It can take two type of models. जहां पर disparities in development है, there what will happen? Normally जहां पर more balanced level of development है, वहां पर क्या होगा? This will be stepped migration like this, ठीक है। But where there is unbalanced development, वहां पर क्या होगा? Everyone would be moving where? To the metropolitan cities. बाद में देखेंगे, we'll call it as the phenomena of metropolization, ठीक है। So this is taking place in stage 3. Stage 3 is the period when internal migration rates are at the highest level, ठीक है। Then we move on to stage 4. Now tell me, can we say stage 4 में also the migration rates are quite high, ठीक है, but this migration is primarily between urban to urban, ठीक है। and I'm talking about stage 4 और 5 दोनों के लिए यहाँ पे एक साथ urban to urban. अब इस पीरियड में टेल मी, पर्टिकुलरली जब हम 5 की तरफ मूव करने लगते हैं तो डिड वी सॉ दैट पॉपुलेशन डिक्लाइन एक्चुअली बिगिंस टू टेक प्लेस, ठीक है। सो टू काउंटर दिस पॉपुलेशन डिक्लाइन, व्हाट द कंट्रीज कैन डू? कैन दे अलाउ इमाइग्रेशन फ्रॉम अदर कंट्रीज, ठीक है। सो ड्यूरिंग दिस पीरियड इंटरनेशनल माइग्रेशन ऑल्सो accelerates, ठीक है। सो देर इज द माइग्रेशन ट्रांजिशन टेकिंग प्लेस। देन देर इज ऑल्सो, इसी के साथ देर इज अर्बन ट्रांजिशन, urban transition also occurs. And if we talk about the urban transition, So this is the time and there is the urbanization. What do you understand by urbanization? Urbanization का मतलब क्या होता है? It simply refers to the uh, percentage of people residing in the urban areas or the proportion of people living in the urban areas. ठीक है? So urbanization क्या होता है? It is a process through which the proportion of people living in the urban areas increase. So this process is referred to as the process of urbanization. ठीक है? So proportion and absolute दोनों terms में. If it is increasing, that is urbanization. Now tell me, can we say urbanization तीन तरीके से हो सकता है? There can be three processes through which urbanization can be accomplished. ठीक है? One, can it happen because of the population growth or natural population growth in urban areas? Yes or no? If natural population growth is taking place in cities, the total number of people living in the cities would increase. So that is one of the common reasons through which what will happen? Urbanization would be taking place. Second, can it happen because of rural to urban migration? ये दूसरा प्रोसेस है. ठीक है? एक तीसरा प्रोसेस भी हो सकता है. And third process is rural to urban classification. So you know, अगर किसी विलेज को मैं क्लासिफाई कर दूं सेंसस में दैट इट इज अ सिटी, so the population of that settlement would be added in the urban population. ठीक है? So there are three ways in which the urbanization can take place. अब देखते हैं. So initially क्या होता है? The urbanization levels are very low. ठीक है? They are very low. In the first stage, they are at very low level. They are in general below 10%. ठीक है? They are in general below 10%. But what then happens with urbanization? It keeps on increasing. Natural aspect is in stage 4, it should be like this, it would become like this. But there can be scenarios. So 1, 2 and 3. There can be 3 scenarios in the later stages. So ये जो मैंने यहाँ पर बनाया है, जो ड्रॉ किया है, this is referred to as the urban curve. It is referred to as the urban curve. ठीक है? Now, can you understand here? At this level, urbanization level is quite low. ठीक है? ये जो है, this level is around 75% and above का level होता है. ठीक है? So here the urbanization is at lower level. So what is the reason urbanization is at lower level? Which type of society existed? It was agrarian society. ठीक है? So there was no industries as such present during this period. जो भी cities होंगी वो कौन सी cities होंगी? दो तरह की cities मिलेंगी. Either they would be administrative cities or they would be rural markets. ठीक है? So essentially you will find two type of cities. One would be either administrative cities or they would be simply market centers. ठीक है? In phase 1. So during this period, what is the characteristic of phase 1? Low level of urbanization as economy is largely agrarian. Low level of urbanization as economy is largely agrarian. As economy is largely agrarian. ठीक है? And as we said, two type of cities mainly found, administrative and market towns. When we reach in stage 2, now what begins to take place? Urbanization begins to rise at faster pace. ठीक है? Here the urbanization begins to rise at faster pace. Now, very important thing here is, in this period, इसमें लिखना चाहते हो तो लिख लो इस period के लिए. So here the pace of urbanization increases or accelerates. Pace of urbanization accelerates. Much of urbanization occurs. Much of urbanization occurs as a result of natural population growth in the cities. Natural population growth in the cities. ठीक है? You can understand इस period में क्या हो रहा है? Can we say there is slow growth of industrialization? ठीक है? So now modern industries begin to grow, so larger cities are also formed. अगर हम इन तीनों components में से देखें, जो तीन component बताएं, this is the major component, then these two together are, their share is lesser in the urbanization process. ठीक है? Then what happens? As we reach to the stage 3, in stage 3 now what happens? The scenario reverses. The contribution of rural to urban migration and rural to urban classification together is greater than the contribution of the natural population growth in total urbanization process. ठीक है? So in this period क्या हो रहा है? The contribution of rural to urban migration, contribution of rural to urban migration and classification is greater than the natural population growth component. Greater than the natural population growth component. ठीक है? एक और चीज यहां पर हम इस पीरियड में लिख सकते हैं. What will be the rate of urbanization growth? The rate of urbanization growth is faster than stage 2. The rate of urbanization growth is faster than stage 2. ठीक है? इसको मैं यहां पर समझा देता हूं. हो सकता है कि बहुत सारे लोगों को समझ में ना आए, but still later also we will see when we'll talk about urbanization in India. Stage 2 में, tell me, when we are talking about stage 2, was the situation something like this? This was rural and this was urban? Yes or no? At the beginning of stage 2 ऐसा था? This was rural, this was urban, and suppose दोनों में growth हो रहा है, where the growth would be higher? Rural में total numbers में rural growth will be much higher. ठीक है? Urban में even if it is growing at faster rate than rural, but total number of people added in urban areas would be much lesser than the rural. सो जो अर्बनाइजेशन चेंज होगा दैट विल बी, कैन आई से इट विल बी लेसर. इंडिया में फॉर एग्जाम्पल बिटवीन 2001 से लेकर के जब 2011 में जो सेंसस आया, ठीक है, what we found that the urbanization levels increased from about 27 to 31, around 31% पे बढ़ गया. So around 4% growth हुआ, which is not so much, which doesn't look so much. ठीक है. Why? Because जो हमने 181 million people की बात की थी, उसमें still if you talk about 90 million people were which type? They were rural. And 91 million people, it was first time when urban growth was higher than the rural growth in total numbers. Okay? So this much amount of people are still added. If you go back in the previous decades, what we will be finding? That even more number of people were being added to rural areas than in the urban areas. So जो percentage change of total people living in the urban areas, can I say वो ज़्यादा नहीं बढ़ेगा, ठीक है. बट थर्ड स्टेज में जब हम आते हैं तो द बेस ऑफ रूरल हैज बिकम लाइक दिस एंड अर्बन इज ऑल्सो नॉट वेरी फार अवे. ठीक है. तो जब अब यहां पर ग्रोथ हो रही है, then this growth would become more visible, and as a result of this, what we will be finding that the urbanization rates would be increasing at a faster pace during this period. जिसको समझ में नहीं आया, वेट फॉर द सेटलमेंट क्लासेस, वहां पर डिटेल में समझाऊंगा विथ एग्जाम्पल ऑफ इंडिया. ठीक है. देन इफ वी टॉक अबाउट एज वी रीच इन स्टेज 4, स्टेज 4 में नॉर्मली क्या होगा? इट शुड डिक्लाइन, सिनारियो 1. ठीक है. दिस इज अ नेचुरल फिनोमेना विच शुड टेक प्लेस, सिनारियो 1 होगा. ठीक है. नाउ वाई सिनारियो 1? बिकॉज अर्बनाइजेशन जो है वो इट हैज रीच टू इट्स वेरी पीक लेवल्स, वेरी हाई लेवल्स, एंड देयर आर सो मेनी बिग सिटीज विच हैव डेवलप्ड. टेल मी, can we say majority of the urban people want to live a more peaceful, relaxed life? Because city life is so much hectic. ठीक है. सो सबका ड्रीम होता है कि आई गो एट सम प्लेस, फार्म हाउस फॉर एग्जाम्पल. आज के टाइम में इतना फेमस हो गया, पीपल आर स्पेंडिंग देयर वीकेंड्स इन फार्म हाउस. बेसिकली वाई? बिकॉज मोस्ट ऑफ द पीपल वांट टू गो अवे फ्रॉम द हेक्टिक सिटी लाइफ. नाउ थिंक इन डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज में क्या हो गया है, the amenities which are available in the cities, almost same level of amenities are also available in the rural areas. ठीक है. there is electricity, there is all modern facilities available. ठीक है. so if it is connected well with the city, can we say it would be better if you go and live in the rural areas? ठीक है. so here what happens, a phenomena starts जिसको हम बोलते हैं counter migration or suburbanization phenomena. ठीक है. In this stage what happens, there is a dominant phenomena taking place, that is urban to rural migration begins. So scenario 1 is result of what? It is result of counter urbanization or suburbanization process. ठीक है. So that is, this is something which will naturally happen if a country develops to that level. Tell me, will this phenomena be taking place in India? कैसे होगा यार? We are still located in third stage of demographic transition. So it is not taking place in India. ठीक है. It is a phenomena which will occur in the developed countries. So if India becomes developed, which is if, then this phenomena might occur. हाँ. देखेंगे इंडिया में जो सब अर्बनाइजेशन प्रोसेस है, इट इज मेनली टेकिंग प्लेस अराउंड मेट्रोपॉलिटन सिटीज, ऑन द आउटस्कर्ट्स ऑफ मेट्रोपॉलिटन सिटीज. हियर इट इज, व्हेन वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट फ्रॉम डेवलप्ड वर्ल्ड पर्सपेक्टिव, ये थोड़ा सा अलग है उससे. ठीक है. सो दैट इज योर अर्बन टू रूरल माइग्रेशन. देन देयर कैन बी सिनारियोज जहां पर 2 और 3 हो सकता है. 2 में व्हाट इज टेकिंग प्लेस, देयर इज the urbanization is almost stagnant. 3 में what is happening, the urbanization levels are actually increasing. ठीक है, तो ये जो फर्स्ट का एग्जाम्पल इज ऑस्ट्रेलिया. ऑस्ट्रेलिया इज द एग्जाम्पल ऑफ द फर्स्ट. सेकंड का एग्जाम्पल इज वेस्टर्न यूरोप एंड थर्ड एग्जाम्पल इज यूएसए. ठीक है, सो वाई देर इज 2 and 3 टेकिंग प्लेस? कैन आई से एक ही तरीका है, नंबर ऑफ पीपल कैन राइज इन अर्बन एरियाज. कैन इट बी इंटरनेशनल माइग्रेंट्स? ठीक है, so this 2 and 3 would occur because of international migration. ठीक है, अब देखो इसमें भी क्या होता है, various countries would have different type of migration policies. Like if you talk about European countries, there is a selective migration policy which they have adopted. So there they are not allowing everyone to enter. ठीक है, they would allow only professionals which are ultimately the white collar workers, doctors, nurses, engineers. Such type of migration is more allowed, or they are allowing white population to migrate. ठीक है, so that is the case of Western Europe. US में क्या हो रहा है बाद में देखेंगे. US में there is lots of illegal migration also taking place from Latin America. ठीक है, and most of these migrants where they will go? Can I say they will go towards cities where the jobs are available? ठीक है, so because of that what has happened, the urbanization levels in North America, particularly USA, have kept on increasing. ठीक है, but this increase is also not high, it is little modest increase is only taking place. So this is basically the case of urban transition. फिर से बता रहा हूं, दिस इज जस्ट वी आर डेवलपिंग अ काइंड ऑफ लिंकेज. ये सारी चीज़ों को हम बाद में अलग से पढ़ने वाले हैं. विल स्टडी माइग्रेशन, वी विल टॉक अबाउट एजिंग, विल टॉक अबाउट अर्बनाइजेशन. ठीक है, आई एम जस्ट गिविंग यू अ फ्रेमवर्क कि कैसे हम डेमोग्राफिक ट्रांजिशन को यूज करके वी कैन मेक आवर आंसर्स मोर मीनिंगफुल, मोर लॉजिकल. ठीक है, दिस इज द सिग्निफिकेंस ऑफ दिस थ्योरी. Then if you talk about, we talked about the development or economic transition. Economic transition. ठीक है, तो यहां पर मैं एक डायग्राम बनाने जा रहा हूं which we haven't studied till now, but when we will study we will recollect this connection. ठीक है, so this is basically the Rostow model of economic growth. ठीक है, so there is initially presence of traditional society. This traditional society passes to a stage of preconditions to take off. Then there is finally a stage of takeoff. Then there is drive towards maturity. Then there is finally age of high mass consumption. ठीक है, सो अगर मैं इसको कोरिलेट करूं अपने डेमोग्राफिक ट्रांजिशन के साथ, दिस इज योर स्टेज 1. These two occur in stage 2. This is your stage 3 and this is your stage 4 and 5. ठीक है, सो हमने देखा था ट्रेडिशनल सोसाइटी एग्रेरियन होती है, Most of the investment is in the primary sector and it is not such commercial levels of investment. But when the change begins to take place, preconditions to take off occurs. यहाँ पर भी क्या होता है? It is still the development is taking place when, where in the primary sector. ठीक है, बट यहां पर कॉमर्शलाइजेशन, कॉमर्शियल लेवल पर प्राइमरी सेक्टर में डेवलपमेंट स्टार्ट हो जाता है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, यहां पर जो एग्रीकल्चर था, दिस एग्रीकल्चर वॉज विच टाइप? सबसिस्टेंस टाइप. what would happen? This subsistence type agriculture, lots of investment would take place and it would be converted to commercial agriculture. ठीक है, you can understand commercial agriculture में what is happening with the productivity? It increases. That means there is more surplus. And can this surplus be taken to industries? So agriculture would begin to supply raw material to the industries, which would fuel what? Which would fuel the industrial development. So इस period में agriculture का transformation होगा, mining industries, such type of industries would develop in the preconditions to take off. ठीक है, then what will happen? There will be the takeoff which would be taking place, and here industrial growth would occur. Here the industrial growth would be maximum in which type of industries? Core sector industries like iron ore, cement, the primary sector industries, जो primary industries जो बोलते हैं, base industries, there most of the growth is concentrated. That is the condition of takeoff. ठीक है, इंडिया में यही गड़बड़ हुआ. Nehru was little bit impatient to be a critique. Even before we completed our preconditions to take off, what we did? We tried to take off. ठीक है, if it was up to Nehru, he would have started the takeoff in first plan itself. ठीक है, you know the Nehru-Manlowis model started from the second plan period. ठीक है, that was where they started to take off. Because there was lots of poverty, food crisis was there, so they had to postpone the process of industrialization for 5 years and they invested in agriculture. We didn't complete our agricultural reforms and we direct tried to switch over to this phase. And can you see, still we are facing the structural problems of the economy. ठीक है, manufacturing hasn't been able to grow. Manufacturing is the sector after agriculture which provides maximum employment. ठीक है, and this is the primary reason why we see today that there is jobless growth taking place in India, because our manufacturing hasn't been able to grow at that level because of those structural problems which we didn't take care initially. ठीक है, so यहाँ पर which type of industries are going? The base industries are mostly growing. Here, however, here when you are reaching to this level, by this time the middle class has become very large. ठीक है, और उसकी वजह से the demand for the consumer goods has become very high. So when you reach and drive towards maturity stage, the consumer goods become the most important manufacturing. ठीक है, so here again manufacturing is very important, most important sector, but it is of the consumer goods. ठीक है, like you know TV etc, various type of consumer goods. आज की डेट में हमारे जो सारे पैसे जाते हैं वो किधर जाते हैं? On these consumer goods. ठीक है, so that becomes the most important. Also there is growth of service sector. In this age of high mass consumption, ultimately what happens? The service sector begins to dominate. It becomes the dominating sector of the economy, along with high end manufacturing. ठीक है, so this is the economic transformation which essentially occurs. So we'll stop for today. We'll continue this tomorrow. तो एक चीज देखा, एक थ्योरी में से कितनी सारी चीजें सॉल्व हो जाती हैं. जस्ट वन थ्योरी, एंड हाउ एवरीथिंग इज कनेक्टेड. ठीक है, सो दिस इज दैट इंटीग्रेशन ऑफ ज्योग्राफी जो हमने बात किया था स्टार्टिंग में, दैट ज्योग्राफी एवरीथिंग इज इंटीग्रेटेड. ठीक है, ओके. एक मिनट, जस्ट 1 मिनट. Sunny, in UPSC there is no topic of cartography and GIS. So unfortunately, I won't be able to help you here out. Okay.